Welcome back to another episode of TikTok Famous Podcast. Today I have on the amazing Barrett Carroll. He is an actor, he is an advocate, he's survived cult life, and he is here to talk about all of it. So stay with us.
You're listening to the TikTok Famous Podcast, where viral fame meets raw reality. Join your host, Meredith Willits, as she dives deep with your favorite creators to uncover the real stories behind the scroll, the highs, the lows, the algorithm chaos, and everything in between. This is not your average interview. This is the TikTok Famous Podcast.
Barrett, thank you so much for being on, which, by the way, my nephew's name is Barrett.
Oh, that's very cool.
I know. I don't know why I didn't put one and one together, but when I was filling out and making your link and all the stuff for today, I'm like, wait a minute, my nephew's name is Barrett. That's not a very common name.
That's true. Is it 2 R's, 2 T's?
Barrett. Yeah, exact.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know it is. It's not the most common, and it's always funny, like when you run into people. But a lot of times I'm like Barrett, and sometimes people look at me a certain way, and I'm like Garrett with a B, you know,
Like Garrett with a B.
Yeah.
And I didn't even announce, like, and also an author, which I have a copy of. I bought these for all my nieces and nephews. Also children's author, which you wrote and illustrated, and it's also a bestseller. So congratulations on that. It's a wonderful story. It's a wonderful message. You survived and grew up homeschooled in a strict, abusive, Christian, fundamentalist cult led by your father.
That's pretty accurate. Yeah.
And you share this all on social media as, I'm assuming, part of your healing. What was that like? I mean, we a lot of us have grown up in strict households, but I don't think people can quite grasp what you went through.
Yeah, I mean, I had I for a long time I slept on a cot in the laundry room. I had I had I didn't get married at 10, but I met like who my future wife was going to be at 10. It was an extremely strict, very physically abusive environment, and I think it took time for a little bit. I mean, it's interesting when I first started kind of talking about things regarding my father and stuff when I was a bit younger. I almost wanted it to not that other people's, you almost wanted like the stereotypical, like the drunk dad who was just, abusive, but it was not just abusive, but it was so much more complicated than that. So it really took the religious element of it. And I used to tell people I wasn't homeschooled because I don't know. I longed for normalcy for so long. And so when people are like, well, why don't you talk to your family or whatever? And I was just like, well, my dad was abusive, and even that took a long time. I mean, really like to my teenage years, and I left home at 16. That took like up until that point to really get there. And then the whole religious element was a lot longer. But yeah, it was not it was not easy. And obviously like everyone's on their own spiritual journey, and I still consider myself a spiritual person, but that obviously has evolved a lot over time, and times when there was nothing, because I didn't really know what to think or what to feel anymore,
Well, I think when you grow up and your parents are hitting you, right? Like, let's just say hitting you, and they're hitting you because they're mad because you did something wrong. That's one dynamic, which I think a lot of us have lived through. Mm-hmm. But when you're doing it in the name of God, if you're doing it in the name of this like higher power that has given the authority, or because you're out of line and you're going to hell and he's trying to save you, I'm assuming that's kind of, you correct me if I'm wrong, it grows this very sadistic, isolating feeling to it, because you're almost like, this person that's doing this really bad thing to me has this justification that I've been born into, and it makes sense, and maybe he's trying to help me. And so it creates this psychotic dynamic of my abuser is helping me, but it doesn't feel right. And this is scary. Like, it takes on a whole different meaning than I'm just beating you because I'm beating you because I'm mad.
For sure. And I think that the psychological element is very hard when, I mean, it's hard to say. Like, there's some people who grow up with this sort of outward, they go to church or they go to the church on holidays or whatever. But for me, it was, I mean, there wasn't a day that we weren't reading the Bible. Like, I can't tell you how many times I've read through the entire Bible, and that's what we were doing every single day. But it was very much my father's interpretation of that. And then, later on, over time, he got additional followers, and he started to ghostwrite legislation for other states and was traveling around. I mean, I always tell people he looks like Charles Manson. I had to go testify in court against him a few years ago, and I hadn't seen him for a long time. And it was a crazy, crazy experience. But it's interesting because what you're saying, I think, is true for a lot of people, and true for me to a degree. But I think also at an early age, I think I always had this sort of instinct that something was not right. Yeah. And I felt like there was so much hypocrisy. And I recognized that I was always someone who pushed back. Like, Same. So, yes, of course, sometimes it was like, I was also a kid. I'm sure there's times when I was rightfully being, disciplined. But there was a lot of times where, I wasn't supposed to speak unless I put my hand on his hip to get permission to speak. There was a lot of things like that where it's sort of these ideas of what, how you're allowed to even breathe or live or move, that was so suppressive, that at a very early age, I was like, this is nothing I want to be a part of,
Yeah. How come you had to testify in court recently?
It's
that you can talk about.
Yeah, it was more to do with like the guardianship over my grandmother, and and so she had kind of didn't want anything to do with him for a long time, and then that gets messy in every family dynamic, but especially one like mine, and ultimately, not to get too into that topic specifically, but I just tried to do my best for like my grandmother's well-being and her time in the end of her life, to make sure she was comfortable and cared for.
Well, I mean, when you're a cult leader, that deems there's some sort of chosen by God kind of energy behind that, right? And that you are this chosen one, and what you are saying and doing are messages, are anointings. And so you, as that cult leader, or your father, and then he started traveling around, is that correct? Where he would actually go and get other people to follow his lead, so to speak. So he was proselytizing, or whatever the word is.
Exactly. So like the specifics of it, it started really, like, he always was abusive, and there was always this element of paranoia, and there was always this element of, and it's interesting. We can get into that, anytime we chat, whether on or off this, but it's interesting because there was many things that I feel, sort of saw ahead of time, that there are elements in society of, like, when it comes to information collection and sort of like government overreach and things like that, that I in ways agree with now. But it was, the main thing that started was when I was about 9 years old, after 9/11 and all that. There was a new driver's license that came in. And part of it is tied into Real ID, which is a lot of why there's a lot of lawsuits against Real ID and stuff. And a lot of that is sort of led by my father. And he believed it was like the enrollment process for the mark of the beast. Mm-hmm. So he believed he was a prophet sent by God to stop the enrollment process of the mark of the beast. And that was sort of where that all, his quirks, if you will say, it all manifested in a much greater way and became a lot more intense moving forward from there, and kind of just continued to grow as the years went on.
How do you wake up, or how does that process happen where, you're 9 years old and it's starting, or maybe it's been feeling weird, like it's been feeling off, like I shouldn't be being hit, I shouldn't be abused. How does that manifest into finally moving out at 16?
So the sort of ironic thing, a lot of people who grew up in cults, their world is sort of pretty suppressed for a really long time, and mine was as well to a certain degree. But my great uncle was Dolly Parton's manager, and I had cousins who were actors and singers, and I had a lot of extended family that were in entertainment. So I had this sort of like, and my parents actually met in a band, which is sort of the irony of all of this. Is I think one of the things I sort of empathize with my father even now is I feel like he was this artist who like suppressed himself for a long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it was interesting because I was allowed to I started doing commercials and stuff when I was like 3, and I was allowed to go do things like that. But it was very like here and there, especially because I grew up in Oklahoma, but we traveled around from Oklahoma to Colorado, Texas, Missouri. Like we traveled a lot. And but I saw other kids. And so it wasn't like in school every day consistent, but it was like, every few months you're doing this thing, you're on set or you're doing a show with other kids, and you just slowly but surely start to see.
Yeah, the differences.
Yeah, no one is living like me,
Yeah.
And that was really a big part of it. I think was a big savior for me in a lot of ways, because I realized that was I wasn't sure what I wanted, but I knew I didn't want that.
Do you think that, I feel I had a nun on, I think it was last week, and she entered the convent, back in the 60s, where you were either going to go to like an ashram, or you're going to go to a nunnery, or you're going to, whatever, go to Berkeley, back in the day. And then after 20 years, she left the convent and went on with her life. Do you think that people, because you're in Hollywood now, so to speak, right? You're doing are you physically in California?
Yeah, I'm in Los Angeles.
Okay,
yeah.
So you're in Hollywood. So you're doing the Hollywood thing. And do you think that as a rule, people, because of what you've seen and what you've experienced, they're looking for kind of parameters. They're looking for a focus. They're looking for something bigger than them to be a part of. And that's how maybe your dad got wrapped. Maybe he was just like, like you said, they met in a band and he was too explosive and too all over the place. And he's like, all right, I got to whittle this down. I'm all over the place. All right, let's go with Christianity. Because even when looking at like the white nationalists, right, and the white Christian culture that we're dealing with now in politics, it feels like they want rules. Like the women that are like, I'm going to submit to my husband and he can be the only voter in our household. It's like they need this, like, I can't be a good person unless I have these rules around me to stay focused. Because if I just am too free, I'll screw it up somehow. Like they don't have like that true north. Do you think that that's kind of how your dad got into this, and what you see when you are around people like this that are a little bit tend to be more free?
Yeah, it's that is something I think I've struggled with for a long time, because it's hard. It's hard because I think that there are people who, like I said, I am still spiritual to a degree. I am a spiritual person. And there are people who I think are genuinely like connecting with something or tapping into something. And then it's a little difficult to sometimes tell the difference between when someone is having an experience, a true experience, and what is that stemming from, versus someone who is having mental illness, or perhaps is just doing so to manipulate people. What are the boundaries of this? Because I mean, there's all kinds, obviously, there's all kinds of cults, and even what you were saying regarding sort of like the Christian right wing, that it was so interesting, because in Oklahoma there were so many people when I finally got away that I was still trying to figure out my own, like going to different, I went to like a Baptist church and a Church of Christ church and all these different things to try and figure out who I was and my identity. And so many of those people had great empathy for me because they were like, oh my God, your dad is crazy. Like, that's not the way God is. That's not the way Jesus is. But then over time, I found a lot of these sort of similarities. While he was this much more extreme version, there were some of these fundamental elements of hypocrisy oftentimes and things like that that I found was often taking place in those environments as well. And I think it's interesting because going back to what you were saying about rules and stuff, I think the idea of fundamentalism as a whole is sometimes a little I think it is problematic, especially if you learn anything about the history of the Bible and how when it became canonized, and the books that have been left out, the books that are put together, the
changing of certain words to benefit an idea or an idealism. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but even still, even if you believe that this is the perfect word of God now, with this, if you have that fundamentalist ideology, there still tends to be so much hypocrisy even within that. Like if you're looking at it like this, because there's so much picking and choosing of, you want to condemn homosexuality using the Old Testament, but then when you talk about mixed fabrics and not eating shrimp and not being
always my favorites, right?
Yeah. And it's like, it's funny the picking and choosing of things, and then you bring that up, and oftentimes they say, well, that's the old law, and it's like, well, it wasn't the old law whenever you wanted to make it about me,
right?
So it's interesting because I think that ultimately I do believe everyone is longing for the same things. I always say, like, I think everyone wants to hear and be heard, see and be seen, and love and be loved. And at the core of who we are, I think that's what we all want. But sometimes there's just a lot of layers to get to that core.
Yeah. And then do you think that you turned all of maybe that inner creativity, that inner emotion that you probably had at such a young age? Like, did you go straight to school at 16 then, or did you enter the acting community? What was your, like, how do you at 16 navigate the real world without, I'm sure, any support from your parents, but you tell me.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was working quite a bit. Like, I was working on a lot of regional theaters and stuff, and I ended up working with a lot of people that were like college age and older, and which also put me in some very interesting circumstances. And that's not even getting into the idea of like figuring out my own identity and my own sexuality, my own, like, just who I am as a human being, because there was so much further down the road to first come to terms with, but even on that path, I think was sort of nice because I think I really learned who I was as a human being before I added any layers or any labels back on. And yeah, I think with acting and all of that, I was working a lot, and then I went to school in Cleveland.
Get out.
I went to school in Cleveland.
Where'd you go?
Baldwin Wallace. It's a music.
Stop it! I grew up in Avon Lake.
Oh shoot, that's crazy.
We were like right down the street from each other. Like literally, that's crazy. My girlfriend went to Baldwin Wallace. She got her master's from there too.
Oh wow! It's such a. I mean, in Cleveland, I always tell people it's such a beautiful city too. There's so much there's so much history, and it's just,
the architecture is great. The people are Midwest.
The food is great.
Lots of good food.
It's it was a cool place. So I went there for part of school, and then I actually left halfway through and came out to LA for a project. And that was one of my first experiences with a producer who was a Harvey Weinstein type. And then I've had many experiences like that. And to be honest, this is something I have this conversation a lot, where there's people who are sort of in my same boat in our careers, where it's like we're certainly not A-list. We like work here. We're like guest starring. We're co-starring. And the business is weird right now too. But to be honest, there's not many people who I know, male or female, who haven't had some sort of like sexual harassment, or something like that in the business, whether in New York or in Hollywood, with managers, producers. And it sort of goes back to the thing with my father. There was an interesting, I think you see it, it's like that saying, like, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it's whenever someone thinks that they're untouchable, the way I think it can easily corrupt their mind is it's scary.
A
It's a
real scary thing.
yeah.
I remember being harassed at my job when I was in, like, 18, 19, 20 years old. And just managers horribly talking. I was, a kid essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And asking like inappropriate questions, and you just kind of get the heebie-jeebies, and you just kind of laugh it off because you don't want to be that girl.
Yeah.
And then you walk away and you feel kind of ick, and then you just hope to God when you go back up to the manager again that he got the picture that it's dead, and not to do it again. How did you find yourself in those situations, and what was your method to get out of there? And were you thinking like, shit, if I just do this,
Mm-hmm.
if I just go along with this, right, I'm going to get this part? And being a young actor, like, it's you the whole idea of being there is to get the damn part, to get the
Mm-hmm.
TV show, to get the movie, whatever. Like, what was going through your mind? I mean, there's part of me that's sitting here going, God, if I would have just stayed with my dad and mom, what's worse, them or like,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're like, the whole world sucks. How do you get yourself out of that situation, or do you?
That's a loaded question. I mean, even when I was working those high school years, and I was working with a lot of people who were older than me, there was a lot of things that I did not appropriate, and it also is sort of it is crazy as now a 32-year-old. I feel like after 30, I was like, I just forgot.
Yeah,
where
you just
my things
you
were.
black out. You're
Yeah.
blacked out till you're 50, so it's fine.
Yeah, I was like, I forgot. But even then, there's so many circumstances I look back on where I would never do the same, and it was not just one or two or three people. It was many, and some were more extreme than others, and some of it's like more a harassment, and some of it was physical. I had a lot, and I know I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
To experience
Well,
that.
obviously, I mean, they're coming out of the woodwork with Weinstein and all of these things about, like, I mean, and I actually just had Adrienne Curry on the other day, and she's like, if you think for 1 minute that the actors that you see on the big screen didn't go and do and be, and I mean, granted, this is hearsay and whatever else. She's like, you're sadly mistaken. She's like, those people got those parts for a lot of reasons, and it's not the good ones a lot of times.
I think that there's certainly, look, I've had some friends who have worked a lot and had great success, and have not had experiences like that. But I do know a lot who have, and I think to answer your question really quickly, it's, I mean, there's one. When I left school, and then I ended up going back to Oklahoma to finish school. So, but that in between, when I was in LA, I had a very big deal put before me, and you don't really, and then it was basically had a caveat of I had to sleep with somebody, and that was pretty much directly how it was put before me. And
just like play to pay, or pay to play.
There was a lot leading up to that, but essentially that was where it ended, and I got really scared and freaked out, and I left LA, and that's kind of why I went back to Oklahoma to finish school, because when I was at BW, it was Baldwin Wallace, it was a conservatory program, so it was, after I had kind of stopped it was hard to jump back into where I was, because it was a very like regimented program. So I also was like, do I even want to be in this business? Like, I mean, it was the only thing I'd ever really known. It was the only thing I felt like I could do. So I wasn't sure.
How old were you when that was put in front of you?
19.
You were, quote, of age. what do you think is like the MO behind that? Like, what are these people like? They're probably powerful. They're probably XYZ. Like, why aren't they just dating normal people? Is it a power play? Is it this psychosis of power and control?
I think so. I think that it's such a competitive industry. I mean, they say that working as a performer, as an actor, whether you're working on Broadway or you're working in Hollywood, I mean, it's literally the most competitive industry.
Yeah.
And I think with that comes a lot of people who are there's people got to pay their bills. There's a
Yeah.
desperation, and people know that there's this desperation, and there's also a lot of really talented people, and so it's easy to there are a lot of talented people, there's a lot of hardworking people, but I will say it is interesting, there are some people who there are some people who everyone is kind of like known that they're maybe not the most talented people who are working a lot, you know.
Yeah.
And that's not always the case. There are most everyone, I think, who is if you've worked at all, I always say if you've worked at all, you there has to be some like base level of talent there. There's a lot of like the writing and the directing and things and the editing that can be such a impact on people's performances, which is part of the unfair element of being an actor. But
Yeah, if you get dumb stuff to say, it's kind of hard to say it well. I mean, you could do your best, but
exactly. So but yeah, I think it goes down to this power dynamic, and also I think a lot of times people who were abused themselves. I mean, I have never abused anyone. I'm an advocate for children, and I've worked with a lot of organizations protecting children. I think that that's never crossed my mind, and not just children, and anyone really. But I do have a passion for protecting kids, especially because I just think there's so much vulnerability there. But there is this power dynamic, and I do think sometimes people who were abused, and especially older generations, sometimes they don't get the psychological help they need. They maybe don't do the self-reflection that they need. They don't do the healing that they need, and then that it can maybe stem or manifest itself in the worst forms.
how, like, speaking about that, that means that somewhere, somehow, I mean, clearly when you were younger, you had that like that electricity going through you that was like, this isn't right. Like something's way off here. I feel like that's who I am. Like I never felt normal inside of abuse. Like I know that sounds dumb, but some people think that they deserve it, then they start to kind of harbor it, and then they take it out on others. You see kids that happens to, they start hurting animals, they start hurting other children at a very young age. Like for me, it just like I always kind of maintain this like loving thing, and so it just always it bounced off of me. Although it made me feel bad, it didn't become who I am, right? And I feel like that's who you are well as well. It didn't become you, it didn't manifest in you as a new abuser. But I know to do that, I'm 52, and really my healing didn't start till I got married at 35. And what modalities, I mean, we'll talk about your book too, but what have you done to kind of get the ick off? Because like that's what it is. It's like, okay, I need to deprogram myself as a victim almost, because you kind of, or at least I did, I became a victim. I became the person that was easy to manipulate. I became the person that was easy to talk shitty to because I wanted to be nice. I never wanted to be like that, right? And so you can be maybe too nice or too agreeable. What have you had to do to get that abuse off of you and start to just kind of become who you are meant to be, so to speak?
I think it's a great point, because I think one of the worst times, I mean, I don't like a victim mentality, but victimhood is true for those who are victims of things.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the worst parts about it is not only the experience, but then other predators of all natures
They can
sniff that.
smell you.
Yeah, they smell it out. Yeah, they know
too.
when people already have this sort of fragileness or this element of, because like you said, sometimes you try and overcompensate. Like you don't want to put yourself in that situation again, or you just want people to like you because you're like, my
Yeah.
parents didn't like me. My
Right.
nothing. I mean, my father, like I said, my father was so abusive, and there's so many things, but it was just this phraseology. Like he would always tell me, "You'll never be worth more than a bottle of piss." Like it was like
Mm.
phrases like that stick with you, and you, no matter how much you want to say, "Oh, I don't believe that. I don't think that about myself." Like you internalize those
It becomes part of your programming. Like you embody that until you stop. Like I remember I was so, and I see people on social, we see them. I know you do too, like on TikTok, and they're like crying because the guy broke up with them, and this, that, and the other. And I'm just like, dude, they did you a favor. Like, but it's so hard to find your backbone. They're like, but I just want to be a nice person, and I just want to be nice, and I just hate confrontation. I'm like, bro, those are your superpowers. Like, until you find that backbone, people are just going to keep stomping and stomping and stomping because they can smell it. And I know they could smell it in me all those years until I'm like, oh no, we're good. Let's confront. Let's do this. Let's have the conversation. Let's speak up for ourselves, because there's either this or that.
Yeah.
And I tell people, it's not about being nice. You can be kind. You can have a good heart. You can have a good mind. You can be loving. You can be generous. You can be gracious. But if you are afraid of confrontation, and if you are afraid of speaking up for yourself, people can see that a mile away and they will take advantage of it. It's just that power dynamic, and you have to choose. You have to choose.
That's very true. I mean, it's like getting thrown into a battlefield, and ultimately you're like, I don't want to be here. Well, you are, and you're there, and you have to respond in the way that you need to respond, and I think it takes time. I think it takes a lot of time. I would say that there was elements where I learned, okay, I'm never gonna let this thing happen again, and then sometimes I did. And there's other things where I learned these lessons over and over, and then, but I still had these sort of vulnerabilities here. Like I always longed for family in my friendships. I always treated anyone into my life the way that I wanted to be treated, which goes back to like, the principles of Jesus when I'm reading these texts as a kid, where I'm like, well, this makes sense to me. Like how come that's not the world I live in?
Yeah.
And I think even as I sort of deconstructed things, I still wanted to move through the world a certain way. But it is interesting because turning the other cheek, sometimes they just keep hitting you anyway. And there are certain elements where you have to eventually be like, you find your own path and you say, I'm not going to allow myself to even be in these situations. And I think it really is stemming from a place of self-love and self-protection and reparenting, and knowing that you're worth choosing better things for. And I think looking at yourself, like I said, I care a lot about kids, and I do believe that everyone is a grown-up kid. And I think that that's really at our core. And I started to think, and I was working with kids a lot at the time, and I felt there were these things that I was being so hard on myself about, or so like self-destructive in many ways. And I was like, if I was a parent in this situation, how would I wouldn't talk to myself the way that I'm currently talking to myself.
Yes.
I wouldn't, I would give myself a little more grace and a little more space. And I think that was when things were really able to shift, because before it was this sort of pattern of reckless behavior or whatever it may be, where I would just kind of continue these patterns, and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And then I would like find myself in that situation again because I felt so much shame about it, instead of like, why am I feeling this way? Do I need this? Is this actually beneficial for me, or is this just a reaction to insecurities, my deep feeling to be seen or wanted or whatever it may be?
Yeah. And I think that that's what happens is that we just get into these cycles that are comfortable, you know, and that was my question next is, did you, after you left, did you feel that pull to ever go back because of missing, or just like, at least I know how to do that. At least I know how to do, you know, my dad's son. I know how to be that person versus all these other new traumas that are in my future in Hollywood. Was it ever really hard? Because I'm sure your mom and dad are a package deal. Did that ever pull you back? And what'd you do with those thoughts, or did you go back?
There have been like encounters, and I try and have a relationship with my mom. My mom actually eventually left my father, and it was 39 years, and it took a lot of convincing, but you know, still, even with that, there was a lot of we're all on our own journey, and you take progress over not progress anytime. So, but sometimes people's progress is maybe not like always as quick as you want. And I would say now it's a hard dynamic, because even still, there's days where I have this level of empathy for my father, and you know, everyone good in my life is like, you shouldn't. But I do, and I often think about like, do I want to try and have one more conversation with him? But there was many, 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 many years where I really tried to talk to him and tried to explain my perspective and tried to reason. And ultimately, though, you can't fix crazy.
Yeah.
And
like deep psychosis, like it's one thing to be like a little crazy or a little depressed or a little anxious or whatever, but we're talking actual, like, I have been chosen by God to come down and deliver messages and change the scope of the planet is a rough one.
Yeah, it's a rough one. It's a rough one. And, with that comes essentially thinking that they can do no wrong. So it's a little hard to like meet somebody in the middle at that point, you know, but
because they're anointed. I mean, but we're seeing that. I mean, I think that we see that, and they've done studies about this. I've talked about it on my other podcast a lot, about how as people make more money and come into more power, how a psychosis at some point does happen where they think, well, I know the answers. I know what's good for everybody because I have all of this money. And, you know, when you see people praying and putting hands on Trump in the Oval Office as the anointed chosen one, you and I both know that's dangerous territory. Like we are in dangerous territory that, and I have Chad coming on from the Necessary podcast, a Necessary Conversation. I don't know if you've seen him on TikTok or not, but
maybe.
He does a podcast. It's him and his sister and both of his parents, and they talk about this stuff. And the parents are very pro-Trump. The mom's got the hat on. She seems like a very nice woman. The dad, not so much. But you hear that, like, he knows what's right. He knows what's best. He's doing it for the love of country. And I even talk to people in my family, and it's just like, it's that same anointed one, maybe not in those words, but you can see the messaging of Trump has been brought here to save us all from ourselves, I guess. I don't know. And I know that you talk and speak out about deconstruction of religion and cults and the political scope of where we're at on social media. How does that feel, putting yourself out there, knowing that there's backlash, there's sometimes danger? Like, what propels you or compels you to share your story so publicly?
I think a big thing, honestly, was, like I said, I'm a performer. Like, I'm a storyteller at heart, and that was maybe not the best use of my social media for me personally, like for my own benefit.
Oh, right. To promote yourself. Trust me, my husband every day is like, why do you put this shit out there? All it does is like probably turn people off from paying you to help them. I'm like, hey, I'll find my people that don't like me, they'll fall away. Like I can't not be me. I can't sit here and just promote myself every day, or it'll make myself crazy.
For sure. And I think that authenticity, it was really during COVID. And I've taken a pretty big social media break the last like couple years, honestly. But during COVID, when everything was like blowing up and growing a lot, I really did so because a lot of the QAnon stuff was sort of what stemmed that, because I'm like an avid researcher too. So anytime there's something, and there was so much talk about like, you remember like all the world's falling apart and the cabals and all these things. And because of the way I grew up, I'm like, I have to get to the truth really fast. Because for me, I grew up literally preparing for the end times. So
yeah.
There was a lot of COVID that very much felt like
end of days.
Yeah. And I have so many. I was actually just yesterday looking back in a journal that I've not looked back from that time. And just thinking about, there's some questioning in there of like, well, was my father right about everything?
Yeah.
Was, things like that. And I think that once I really got it clear.
And then you're like, oh shit, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I should be prepping. Maybe I should be,
for sure.
Maybe this is the parting of the sea and all the things. And I remember just to speak to your sanity of our insanity is I remember when Notre Dame burned in Paris, and I was like, oh God, here's another sign, because you start to get in, like shit starts going, like all the dead birds, all the dead fish. You're like, oh my God, like this is a thing. Like here comes a 20-year locust. Like, like I can't even make videos in my backyard. My dad and I couldn't even sit in the backyard and make videos or talk because it was so loud with the cicadas. And you do, like, I know that sounds crazy if you're listening and you're like, how are you guys so nuts? But when you do learn end of days, you start looking, and your brain is nothing but an algorithm, and it's out there looking for things that are in alignment with some point in your brain that goes, yep, and and you're like, well, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they're right, maybe I should. No, 1000%. It's scary as shit.
It is, yeah. And it's you then all these things that you feel like you've sort of deconstructed from or gotten away from, then all of a sudden you have just this flood of panic, because you're like, well, if that's not right and this is not right, but then you're also like, I don't want to go back to that. I don't want to go, like, because that never felt right internally, but all these signs and things feel like it's something, and so I really had to take the time to deeply read and be like, okay, what is really happening here? And so, like, I mean, regarding like Epstein years ago, I mean, I've read every single released Epstein court document, and because I had to, and which, I mean, that's a whole different topic, because there's so much that has been out there for a long time that people on the right and the left don't talk about. There's people that are in documents that I've never heard anyone talk about. It's also like, you also see how people they make everything like about the island, for example, when it's like, well, there was abuse that happened in New York, there was abuse that happened in his place in New Mexico, there was a place, it's not just one thing, but without the context, you don't know that. And not to make this about Epstein, but that was just an example of things that I really had to search and read about, and especially because I was very much like, oh, these people want to like protect the kids and they want to like care for kids, and then slowly but surely I was like, oh, but you see how much of a political influence was there, and how that only protecting the kids only applied to as long as it aligned with their worldview, and which is not always the case. There are certainly people who I think that at their core, no matter what, like they have good intentions and they are willing, but you have to be willing to see the truth. Like you have to be willing to question. I always tell people, like, if you want the truth, you have to go looking for the things that you don't want to see. And you have to look for the things that are not going to just reiterate your worldview already. You have to look for the things that challenge your worldview, the things that challenge the way you see everything. And then you can work backward a little bit, because if you're just looking to be validated, that's not really stemming from a place of like a desire to learn or grow or really to find the truth. So I'm not sure if that answered. I'm not sure if that answered.
Well, I had Unlearn 16 from TikTok on here. She's got the Mohawk. She's a teacher in Canada, and she's just fantastic. She was on the podcast last week, and she was talking like, if we all just started from everything is gray, like there are no absolutes. There is no black and white, because black and white is such a safety mechanism. It's such an alignment with the ego of upholding the ego of, okay, this is this and that is that, and this is where I am and this is where you are, and then I know how the world works because it's all black and white and it's very clean and tidy, right? But if we just said, well, what about? That's the beginning of unlearning and then therefore learning, right? Well, but what about? Because even, you see with the Epstein piece are people that are like, but they were 16, but they knew what they were doing, but they kept going back. And it's like, okay, well, let's just go to gray. Let's get out of the black and white of they went back and go to gray of, but these were poor kids from Palm Beach. You know what I mean? These were people that were very much in need, like of financial situations, or they were being, manipulated, and they were being manipulated because they were youth, et cetera, et cetera. But I loved what she said when she was saying, like, go to gray, get out of your ego, because when we're Democrat, Republic, straight, gay, Democrat, Republic, doesn't matter what it is. It's a portion of your ego that aligns with certain things that are like pockets. It's like, if you just get out of that pocket of who you think you are and kind of move over to the middle, and now we're having a conversation, unlearn everything you've ever learned, and then let's go from that place. And I think that, which is so fascinating, that Epstein has become such a topic for politics right now. Like, if he's on that list, then I am done with him. But not any of the other stuff that's going on. But that people seem to be like, it's such a concrete. It will be interesting when they finally do release it, because I feel like they're going to have to. Unredacted, we'll see. I would be shocked.
I don't know.
You're like, there's way too many people on it, right?
Yeah. It's also just complicated, because I also understand that, like, there were people who knew him socially. There were people who traveled this island socially who have never been accused of anything. And so there's that element too. There are people who are business leaders and world leaders, and he was in those inner circles. I mean, to me, I think you got to get like first start with the people who remained friends with him after the first time he was convicted of trafficking children. Yeah. Those are the people who I'm like
the prince in England, whatever. Yeah. He's having that conversation outside of right before he goes to prison. It's like, maybe we have an issue. No, I mean, because I remember, like, back in the day, my family was friends with this other family, and like we vacationed with them, like, nice guy, leader. I mean, he's dead now. So, I mean, he was the mayor. And it turns out that he's like soliciting prostitutes and all this other crazy shit. And we're just like, we didn't know that he was into any of that stuff. We just thought he was a family man. Like, we thought he was the mayor of our city, and so there are, and people would be like, how could you not know? I don't know, maybe because I wasn't in the car with him when he was soliciting prostitutes.
For sure.
So like, there are obviously going to be people that are on, quote, the list. But it's like, I don't know, if you're transferring $1.1 billion into Epstein's bank accounts, I want to know what you got for that. Where's the plane?
For sure. Why does no one know, like, exactly how that man made his money? Right. I think that's like, and that's not a right or left thing. And hopefully it's something that is going to unite people to a degree. We'll see.
I hope so.
We'll see. I feel like it's this topic where it just kind of like comes up again. And now it's obviously like a big thing again. And I'm like, I'm not like holding my breath too much.
You're like, I know Hollywood too well to know that that's getting out.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, Harvey Weinstein is just the tip of the iceberg. You know, people talk about him a lot. They're like, the Harvey Weinsteins. I'm like, Harvey Weinstein is just one guy, and there's he took they put him on display to say, oh, look at this.
Yeah.
But there's all of these.
He's the bad guy. He's the monster.
There's a lot more that are below him, beside him, you know.
Well, it seems like an epidemic. I mean, if you look at Diddy, if you look at Hollywood, if you look at all of these things, it's like, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to videotape you. And now I'm going to be able to manipulate you for the end of time because I've got you on video. I've got you, dead to rights of what I know that you're capable of. I just made a video like that about Trump yesterday on TikTok, like how I envisioned the Alaska meeting going. And it was like Putin's like, I've got video, bro. You're going to give me Ukraine. You're going to give me a part of Alaska. And he's like, I can't do that. And he's like, you gonna. And 3 hours of that.
Yeah, I know. It's interesting. I know, like, the political stuff, it's like I can't help it but stay a little in touch with it. But I'm way less in touch than well, maybe not less in touch, but I like make less content about it, and because there was an element that I felt it was sort of taking my peace away, and I was like, it's
definitely toxic.
Yeah, and I was like, there's very few people I'm convincing of anything, and also just the 24-hour news cycle as a whole, I think is sort of.
Yeah, I don't think Aaron Parnas sleeps. Yeah, I really don't. I don't think that. I think he's gonna be like. He's going to be like a president. He's going to go in looking one way and come out 4 years looking a completely different way. Like,
I mean, there's even some like news commentators that are really interesting because they like travel with the president and question, but then they also are like hosting more than one show, and they're in different cities. And I'm like,
how?
That's a lot. It's just a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's lot for them and for us.
Yeah. So you just got back. We talked before we came on live.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about, because I watched your adventures overseas. Was that trip a part of like intentional healing, or was it just like a bucket list, or all the above?
I mean, I appreciate you asking about it. I had always wanted to travel more, and I've always loved ancient history. I mean, I've just been someone who like reads, and especially, growing up the way I did, the first stories I ever knew were biblical stories. Like this. I mean, the first movie I ever saw in theaters was The Prince of Egypt, like the cartoon, which and I ended up working a lot in musical theater and stuff as well, and that was all the music of like Stephen Schwartz, and so I think it was a really big part of like my love of that part of the world and stuff. And I did a contract performing in Saudi for 2 months, and I'd never even been on that side of the world before.
Wow.
And everyone was like, Saudi Arabia, you're gonna go to Saudi Arabia? And that alone was something where there were some contracts at different places that are, whether it depends, like whether you're working on a film or whether you're working like in theater, but sometimes contracts tend to be like, if it's for theater, it tend to be like a 6 month or a year-long contract. And then it always was kind of like a long time for me. And so this was great because it was a 2-month gig, and I had really been like putting out into the universe that I wanted this adventure, and I really needed to get out of LA at that time, just for myself. Like
energetically.
Yeah. And this opportunity presented itself to go to Saudi Arabia, and just like every other element of my life, I feel like has always been this sort of random wild adventure. And so I went there and I lived in Saudi Arabia for 2 months, and then it was a great experience. I learned a lot, and there's certainly things, people say that there's things that are scary, but I would say for the most part, people are very hospitable there. The laws are very strict, but because of that, like there was elements where I felt extremely safe. I mean, you're not worried. You can walk anywhere. You're not worried anyone's going to rob you or anything, because punishment is extremely intense. And so it was an interesting dynamic. And then I sort of took all of the money I made from that gig, and I was so close to Egypt, and that Egypt's always been like my number one place. And
I saw all those videos and you talking about it. I was like, oh my God, what a dream.
It was a dream. It was a dream come true. And I feel like sometimes I get lost in talking about Egypt because I went to Egypt first, and then Italy, and then Greece, and then Italy. And Greece and Italy were amazing as well too. But Egypt really was this. I mean, Italy as well, but and Greece, but Egypt was really this sort of dream. It was a dream come true, and the way it all worked out, I planned every single detail. I'm gonna just say, if you ever go to Egypt, I would just plan every single detail, because even still, there's going to be things that fall apart. There's like tour guides who will pass you off to their friend, and there's going to be things like that a little bit. But as long as you kind of have a pretty consistent, good schedule, and like who's picking you up and where you're going, and but yeah, I was in Giza for a couple days, and I wanted to stay right by the pyramids, and then I traveled all of like through Saqqara and stuff, which is like the step pyramid, is the oldest pyramid in the world, and then flew down to Aswan, and then took a boat up the Nile for 4 days and went to all the temples like along the Nile, not all, but a lot of them, and then spent a couple days in Luxor, and it was just incredible. And anytime anyone gets a chance to travel, and it's very inexpensive too. So if anyone
is it really?
If anyone has an interest in traveling, I mean, pretty much $1 to us is equivalent to about $50 for them. So there's some people who go in, they complain about tipping and things like that, because there's a lot, like you have to pay for toilet paper if you go to the bathroom. You have to pay for a lot of things like that. And a lot of Westerners I saw online when I was researching kind of like complain about that. But at the end of the day, I'm like, they're just trying to survive. So if you go in with that mentality, and you have, okay, if I'm tipping someone a little bit, it's a few cents to me,
Yeah.
And I do just go in with that mentality, but it is very inexpensive. And
I always say that like traveling is the best education that you could ever do for yourself or your kid. It's a great common denominator. It levels everything out in your brain, and who you believe yourself to be, who you believe others to be, quote unquote.
Sure.
I think that it changes you internally. I remember when I went to Bali, I've been to India, I've been to other countries. And when you go there, you're like, this third world, quote, country, which it is, but is so magnanimous. It's so interesting. There's so much to offer. The people are amazing, and they all have smiles on their faces. They're living in dirt poverty, not just poverty, dirt, tent poverty on the side of the road. It just changes you forever and ever, and you've done so much acting to date. Let's see, Disney, NBC, Warner Brothers. You've been in countless shows and plays, etc. And I think that not only does traveling help in acting, but it helps in every facet. I know my children are changed from them traveling, and anything that you can ever do. When I had a viral video was like, just travel. Like it's better than getting, like, if you take a class in Italian history, or if you go to Italy, you're going to learn so much more and be with the people, get out of the main cities, go eat in a little tiny whatever, sit on the side of the road, like do the thing, be around the people. You're going to learn so much more. It's just, and I look at it too with your acting career. It's like every time you put yourself in a new experience, it's like a seed. Oh, like the acorn journey. Just say in your book. It's like a seed, though, planted inside of you to be able to portray that someplace else on the big screen. And so the more we put ourselves in, the more we get out. The more we put ourselves in, the more we can express that out in the acting world as yourself. Do you talk to I know you and Diane Christensen, she was on my other podcast, Meredith with a Y, which she is amazing. I'm obsessed. I'm like to offer acting classes online for adults.
I think she does.
She definitely does for kids. I think she does some different things for adults, but, do you talk to, or does she talk to the young kids coming up in, um, acting about the casting couch? Do you ever have those conversations with those kids?
Yeah, I mean, Diane's great. She's always been like a mentor and just a a light and to many people. And yeah, I think it's interesting because she's worked a lot with I mean, she's worked a lot with everybody, but she's worked a lot with a lot of young kids who are coming up, and um so much of that dynamic is really important, and something that was really missing for me is I would kind of just go and do the thing as a kid, which is sort of what led to the issue. But having your parents involved is such a big thing. Of course, there can be a fine line between like a momager and
A momager, yeah.
yeah, but ultimately I've worked with kids, and there some parents are terrible and some parents are amazing with their balance, and you can tell that they're really just like, oh, my kid loves this and I want to help support my kid in doing this. And while I'm sure Diane has had conversations with, I mean, I know some of her experiences, I know like she and I have talked about things for sure, and um you know it kind of, I think, depends on the individual, because some people
Yeah.
have a better family unit that they can sort of confide in,
Yeah.
or people that are sort of protecting them. And there are more protections overall for children in Hollywood now, not just physically, but like also financially. There's things in place, because a lot of parents back in the day were taking all their kids' money when the
All
kids
the
were
money.
acting. So
Yeah.
there are some protections in place now, but it is still there's a bit of a debate now with like the Jeanette McCurdy book, and a lot of the kids who are from Nickelodeon and stuff. There's a lot of conversation about
That
should
was a wild documentary. Holy crap.
it is and there's so many stories like that. There's kids and adults who they do one or two things. They're not starring on the show, and they have the same experience. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people who have experiences like that with a lot of empty promises, which is, I wouldn't say is worse, but it is terrible in its own way too. Because I don't want to say like at least they got something out of it, but I think it's really terrible for someone to put themselves or experience abuse for a long extended period of time and think that they're doing it because they're going to get something out of it, and
Yeah.
also not, you're just totally thrown to the wayside. Is I mean, it's all horrible, but that's definitely a
Well, and we're seeing it now on social media. There was a big documentary recently, about like YouTube stars, like these parents pushing their kids onto YouTube.
mhm,
They're day in, day out, then they get friends, and then it's this whole thing. And, these kids are working 12, 15 hours a day, literally making YouTube. And because it's YouTube, it doesn't have the same parameters as,
mhm,
let's say, television, or let's see movies. Like we're always seeing kind of this thing where we need protections for kids, and these vloggers
mhm,
that are, I actually am having, that's inappropriate, Meredith, Miss Masonry, I can't think of her last name right this second, but she talks a lot about her family, and I'm always mesmerized, because I'm like, if my kid, like, they're like, don't put that on TikTok, or don't put that on Facebook, don't put that on Instagram, and I'm always like, I know, like, I don't talk about like anything about my kids.
mhm.
And like my kids would destroy me if I was like, oh, and today when I dropped off my daughter at school, she would be like, take it down. Like they are so private. They
Yeah,
want nothing to do with it. And
which is
so,
good, which is a good,
yes.
it's a good thing, because I know it's especially interesting the parents that, I mean, it's all complicated, but it is especially interesting the parents that are like pushing their kids into certain things. And I think sometimes there's this element of like them living their fantasy
Vicariously. Oh,
out.
well, that's,
Yeah,
well, let's be very clear. My son plays sports, and the crazy that I see in sports, it's no different.
for sure. For
It's
sure.
insane. I'm
For
like,
sure.
your kid weighs 48 pounds and he's a freshman in high school. what are we talking about this football for? Like,
the intensity is crazy sometimes. You're like, it's like, who knows
kids.
where these kids are going to grow up and what maybe they pursue this in college or who knows, but the like nastiness is always crazy.
Oh, it's wild in my town. Like it's next level. Before we go though, I do want to talk about your book, The Acorn's Journey, written and illustrated. The illustrations are just like 10 out of 10. I'm just kind of popping them up there. Beautiful. The story is about survival. It's about healing. It's about staying and understanding that as you go through the turmoils of life, like just keep being a good person, keep being kind. And it's all going to work itself out. And I think that you and I definitely share in that mindset that we didn't want to become that which we came from, regardless of the extremity of that. Like we really didn't want to embody. A lot of times in psychology, they say you either become the abused or the abuser when coming out of trauma. And I didn't want to be either. And I can tell when I talk to you and I see your videos and I see how hard you work to grow like the acorn from where you've been, that you didn't want to be the abuser or the abused anymore either. You definitely decided like I'm gonna do all of the things to get to the other side of this and just be a nice, healthy person. And to that, I give you so much credit because it's not like it's a choice, but it's definitely a decision.
For sure. For sure. And obviously there's a lot of internal battles every day. I mean, just like when you've experienced abuse or, you know, when life is kind of throwing a lot of curveballs at you, sometimes just the day in the day out can be difficult. But ultimately, I think I decided a long time ago that my life was not just about me. And I think that is the thing that drives me. And I mean, even with, you know, with the book, I wanted it to be something that not just kids can like, but I hope that if a parent is reading to a kid or a nanny's reading to a kid or whoever, yes, a teacher, that it's something that maybe there's something that resonates for them as well. Because like I said, I think we're all grown up kids, and remembering that like no matter what you face, you can choose to find the beauty in the scary things, and you can choose to no matter where you get thrown or no matter where you get planted, ultimately it is your choice how you're going to continue to grow.
Yeah, such a beautiful message. Are you working on anything currently before we go?
Yeah, so I just I've been doing a lot of writing. So I have a few feature films that are sort of like in the works currently. And I just shot a film that I wrote and directed, a short film, horror. It's so interesting. I've kind of gotten involved in the world of horror, and then I'm also writing children's books at the same time. So it's like this interesting dynamic. But yeah, I just shot that with Dot Marie Jones, Kyun Kim, Brandon Delsid, and Devin Way. And it was incredible. And everything has like, all of it has messaging. I mean, that film has a lot of commentary about, well, you just have to see. It's called Eat. And it is, I actually just saw the first edit last night for it. And so I'm really excited about that. And think then in the next year, it's probably going to go through like the film festival route first, and then we'll see where it goes from there. And yeah, and then I have a children's book series I'm working on, but I can say more about that like a little bit later date. But
okay, you'll have to come back and share all that. I have a amazing, but it's a I don't know what you even call it. I'm not in Hollywood, but I have an amazing idea that I've had and held on to for probably a decade now. If you ever want to talk big film, I think it would be unbelievable. It's as we're sitting here, I'm just laughing because it's so in alignment with everything that you and I kind of at our sinew. I'll throw it to you on email and see what you think.
I think that there's never been a better, I mean, just real quickly for any creatives out there, of any kind, whether you want to be in film or TV or New York or whatever you want to do, or you want to write, I would say there's a lot of sort of, I know even in my own community, there's a lot of like almost heaviness because the industry is shifting really quickly. There's a lot of, I mean, there's always been uncertainty in this industry, but there's even a lot more now. There's less work than there was before with streaming services. It's a lot of shows are being cast in other countries, in other states. You know, there's a lot going on, but because of the internet and things like that, I think that there's never been a better time to create. So if you have a desire to tell stories, I think that you just have to put it out there because there is an audience for almost everything. I think it becomes a little more niche sometimes, but you never know who you're going to you come across or who might need to hear your story or who's going to align with your story or where that story might go. And there's never been a better time.
And to put it out there. I mean, now we don't have to deal with like marketing agencies and PR agencies necessarily. You can really push out your own content in a very new and exciting way. I mean, people are doing sketches all the time, all over social media and putting themselves out there. So it's definitely an exciting time to be a creator and a creative. But I thank you so very much. I think whoever took that photo that you sent me, because it is the most, I sent it to my girlfriends. I'm like, ha, 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 ha. I go, and P.S. and he's also like the world's nicest person. So
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Handsome, talented, kind, nice. Just the best ever, Barrett D. Carroll. I so appreciate you being here and sharing your story. I'm so proud of you for making it through all those years, because I know that I'm sure there were many days that you just wanted to throw in the towel because, you know, abuse sometimes brings us to the brink. But I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart for sticking with us and sharing your story and sharing your message to so many people that have needed to and continue to need to hear it. So thank you, my friend. And thank you for blessing me with coming on the podcast today and sharing yourself with us.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for doing the same. It's, I appreciate you. And this was awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. I'll see you guys all here next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the TikTok Famous Podcast with Meredith Willits. If you're loving the unfiltered stories and behind-the-scenes truths, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show. Until next time, let's get famous.